Socrates had a student named Plato. And not only did Plato write down what he remembered Socrates saying, but he also wrote to present his own ideas. The Republic is one of Plato's famous works, and while Socrates is used as a character in the text, the ideas in the Republic are Plato's. An important idea presented in the Republic is the simile of the line, which presents Plato's ontology and his epistemology. For Plato, the type of reality we are dealing with affects our epistemological state. A copy of the line is in chapter 2 of your text. On the right side of the line is Plato's ontology, his theory of being, and on the left side is the epistemology, his theory of knowledge. The lower half of the line is the world we perceive with our five senses. It is the visible world. The visible world depends on the sun. We have to have the sun's light for there to be a world we can see. While we are dealing with the lower half of the line, we are talking about opinion. Knowledge does not exist in the lower half of the line. What kinds of reality produce opinions? But no knowledge. For Plato, images do. He gives the examples of shadows and reflections. If we are dealing with images, we are in an epistemological state of imagination. Plato's point becomes clearer when we move up the line to a state of reality that deals with sensible objects. Sensible objects are entities in the physical world: houses, chairs, cars, rocks, dogs, trees, and so on. Consider a tree. For Plato, the tree is more real than the shadow cast by the tree, because the tree lasts longer and is more permanent than the shadow. Also, the tree can exist without the shadow, but the shadow cannot exist without the tree. When dealing with sensible objects, we get belief, which is a better state than imagination. Although a tree is more real than its shadow, we still cannot get knowledge from a sensible object. Knowing something requires more than believing it. For Plato, we can never know anything solid about the sensible world. It is always changing, like Heraclitus says it did. How can we know anything about the sensible world if it won't hold still long enough? A tree might stay still longer than a shadow or a reflection, but it still changes with the seasons and the environmental conditions. Both the tree and the shadow depend on the sun. A tree can't grow without sunlight, and it can't cast a shadow without the sun. For Plato, we just can't know anything about a world that is always shifting around. It's too chaotic. Let's move to the upper half of the line, which deals with the intelligible world. The upper half is the reality that stays still long enough to study, so we can gain some knowledge about it. The upper half of the line works like Parmenides says reality works. It doesn't change. How many of you have seen the cartoon Over the Hedge? There's a character in that film named Hammy, and Hammy, oddly enough, isn't a pig, he's a squirrel. Anyhow, I was taking a walk with some kids, and there were all these squirrels everywhere. The kids went nuts. They kept shouting, "There's Hammy! There's Hammy!" For the kids, the squirrels weren't squirrels. They didn't have the concept of squirrel. The kids were still dealing with a particular object, Hammy, and every squirrel they saw was Hammy. That is the difference between a particular object and a concept. Once we have the concept of squirrel, we recognize that Hammy is a particular individual within the larger classification of squirrel that consists of many other individuals. Once we get that, we have grasped a concept. We have attained a degree of knowledge. We have attained understanding. But concepts still connect to the sensible world and the five senses. Therefore, they are still images, and they are not pure knowledge. A little further up the line from concepts, we get the forms. These forms are the perfect patterns that everything else in the universe is based on. Squirrels come in all shapes, sizes, and colors, but we recognize them all as squirrels despite these differences. That means we understand the concept. The form of a squirrel is the primal squirrel that is eternal and unchanging. The squirrel form wasn't created. It always existed, and it cannot be destroyed. The squirrel form cannot be grasped through the senses. It does not exist in the physical world. The squirrel form can only be understood by the intellect, by pure reason. For Plato, the expression of pure reason occurs through mathematics. Like Pythagoras before him, Plato believed the best way to understand the universe is through math, through numbers. We know that we grasp a form when we understand an object or concept through math, because mathematical expression does not depend on the sensible world. We don't need a cone or a sphere or a cube in front of us to see and touch to express an understanding of geometry. These shapes can be grasped through reason expressed in math. All right. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking that math is okay for understanding some aspects of the world, but what would an equation for love or hate or bravery look like? And hey, what would the equation for a squirrel look like? It's a fair point, and there are several possibilities. Perhaps it is impossible to know anything about love or hate or bravery. Then again, maybe there is an equation for love and hate or bravery, and one day some nerdy student at some university will discover it. And for the squirrel equation, I don't know. You will have to ask a biologist about that one. Wait a second. We left the good hanging out there on the right side of our line. What's up with that? It turns out that the forms aren't the ultimate reality. Just like the visible world depends on the sun, the intelligible world depends on the good. What is the good? It is the center, the anchor that holds the whole show in place. It is the form of forms. The good holds because it holds, and the whole universe is stable because it does. The good is perfection. If we took one O out of good, now we have God, and we would have an excellent picture of the epistemological system for much of the Middle Ages in Europe. The simile of the line can be a little hard to wrap your head around, and Plato knows that too. He also presents the line in story form through the allegory of the cave. When you are ready, watch the movie about the cave and read the text version. If you still have questions about the line or the cave, ask Professor Halsey for help. Don't be shy. He has all the time in the world. Finally, remember that Plato isn't necessarily right. We still need to take a look at empiricism in the next chapter, but first consider Plato's cave, not to mention Descartes' version of rationalism. See you around.